Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Rodriguez, and I will be doing my informative speech on domestic violence against women. Let's first talk about a little history about domestic violence. The first attested use of the word expression domestic violence was in the early 1977. Modern attention to domestic violence actually began in the women's movement in the 1970s. The concern was about husbands beating their wives at that time. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, domestic violence is defined as abusive behaviors that is used in relationships to gain or maintain control over the other individual. Domestic violence can be put into three categories: emotional, verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. Did you know that 248 of every 1,000 females are victims of physical assault and or rape committed by their own spouse? And that 1 out of every 3 women around the world have been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused in her lifetime. That's 1 out of every 3. Emotional verbal abuse is defined as any behavior that threatens, intimidates, and undermines the victim's self-worth. It can also be referred to as psychological abuse, since that is what the perpetrator uses to play with the victim's mind. This kind of domestic violence can include humiliating the victim, controlling what they can or cannot do, isolating the victim from their friends and family. It can also be constant name calling. It can be threatening to kill them if they leave them. It can be threatening to kill the people that the victim loved, the loved ones in their lives. Emotional verbal abuse can really damage a person. Women who actually undergo this type of abuse often suffer from depression and can commit suicide, can have eating disorders, and or can start the use of drug or alcohol. Another type of domestic violence is physical abuse. Physical abuse is any contact intended to cause feelings of intimidation, pain, or injury, or physical suffering to the victim. Physical abuse includes hitting, punching, choking, pushing, and other types of contact that result in injury to the victim. It can also include inflicting pain, injury on other targets such as the victim's children in order to have psychological abuse on the actual victim. Physical violence is estimated to occur in 4 to 6 million intimate relationships each year. And 25% of the female population will be physically abused in their lifetimes. The scariest part is actually knowing that women make up 3/4 of the victims of homicide by an intimate partner. Meaning 33% of all women are murdered by an intimate partner due to the domestic violence. The third classification of domestic violence is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is any situation in which force is used to obtain participation in unsafe, unwanted, degrading sexual action. What many women actually don't know is that forced sex, even by a spouse or intimate partner with whom they have had consensual sex before, is still sexual violence. It is still considered rape. Women whose partner abuse them physically or sexually are at a high risk of being seriously injured or being killed, as shown in the previous statistics. 78% of the victims of rape are actually women. In 8 of 10 of those rape cases, the victim knows the perpetrator. A very interesting fact, the National Women's Study did a 3-year study of probability of 4,008 women. And they found that 13% of these women have been victims of rape during their lifetimes. 22 were assaulted by someone they didn't know. 9% were raped by their own husbands. 11 were raped by their fathers. 10 were raped by their boyfriends. 16% were raped by relatives. And 29% were raped by their own friends or their own neighbors. As you can see, domestic violence can be categorized into 3 categories: verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. Domestic violence is more serious than people have made it seem. Women's lives have been scarred, or many have been even killed. And seeing how their lives are being tortured with these horrible crimes and nothing is really being done about it is really sad. As hard as it is, women need to realize that they need to get out once the abuse starts and realize that there is help out there, that they're not alone. Let's not become another statistic. Thank you.
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah, aplauso.
Good, good, good.